Chapter 457, Sacred Wood Sphere. This chapter is updated by Novels.pl. Is Zhang Yuochen perceiving profound sword techniques? Juan Mook Singerling said. The masked woman's eyes flashed disapprovingly, showing her disagreement with Juan Mook Singerling's words. She said coldly, "What Zhang Yuochen wielded is the sacred sword skill, which is a low-class spiritual martial technique of the Yin and Yang sect. In Yin and Yang sect, even a warrior of the Black Realm can succeed in the practice of this sword technique. Even if it is profound, how deep could it be? Despite the thin veil covering her face, her extraordinary temperament could not be concealed. One can imagine that under the veil must be a stunning face. Her bright eyes were filled with scorn. She regarded Zhang Yuochen as a young and famous warrior who had become conceited because of his success and reputation. From her point of view, people like Zhang Yuochen were like frogs at the bottom of a well. Once they met a real superior, they would easily fall into a bottomless abyss. Juan Mook Singerling turned her eyes and said, "The profound that I was talking about is not sword technique movement but the sword technique realm contained in the sword technique. Don't you know that Zhang Yuochen has achieved heart integrated into sword? Among young warriors, Zhang Yuochen has a peerless sword technique realm." That's not necessarily true. Seeing as Zhang Yuochen was able to practice heart integrated into sword, naturally, there may be a sword technique genius who can also practice heart integrated into sword realm. The masked girl spoke in a confrontational manner while staring coldly at Juan Mook Singerling. Juan Mook Singerling made no concessions and laughed. "If that is so, then we shall wait and see. The Colosseum is right there. The outcome will be decided soon." On the heavenly ring, Lu Fanshan had dodged Zhang Yuochen's sacred guiding sword 17 times in a row. Lu Xiuan stood up with her hands on her hips and shouted with some annoyance, "Elder brother, can you do it or not? If not, get out of the Colosseum immediately. You cannot bring disgrace upon the sword sanctum." Hearing this, Lu Fanshan became flustered. He glared at Lu Xiuan grimly. It wasn't just Lu Xiuan, the other warriors in the Colosseum of Martial Market were getting impatient. Originally, they thought it would be a wonderful battle between two geniuses. They did not expect it to be so boring. From beginning to end, Zhang Yuochen only attacked Lu Fanshan with the same sword technique, while Lu Fanshan just kept evading Zhang Yuochen's attack. If this kept on, what was there to see? Actually, Lu Fanshan fought humbly and had no choice but to keep evading because he could not anticipate Zhang Yuochen's next movements. After 17 movements, Lu Fanshan finally found resolve in his heart and was ready to fight back. When Zhang Yuochen displayed his 18th sacred guiding sword, Lu Fanshan counterattacked instead of evading. Lu Fanshan held a long sword inlaid with gold wires and stabbed straight forward. Crash, crash. The two swords interlocked, giving off sparks. There was a shrill noise from the friction. Finally, a real fight. The Colosseum of the Martial Market began to settle down again. The talents of the Heaven Board who had come especially to watch this battle concentrated their attention on the match with bated breaths. They wanted to see the sword techniques of Zhang Yuochen and Lu Fanshan. Just how good were they? With one move, Zhang Yuochen and Lu Fanshan separated and retreated to different sides. In just a few moments, Lu Fanshan launched an attack. Holding the hilt, he mobilized the genuine chi from his entire body and gathered it in his arms. And then he suddenly slammed down his sword. It was a very domineering sword. It was smooth and clean, without any fancy tricks. From the spectator stand, the crowd could clearly see that a sword chi wave flew out of Lu Fanshan's sword, separating the air left and right to form a magnificent sword technique waterfall. Faintly, everyone could hear the rumbling sound of a waterfall, shaking their souls. That sword is terrifying. Lu Fanshan is indeed very strong. The power of his sword alone is enough to fight recklessly against a monk in the first change in the Fish Dragon realm. Juan Mook Singerling's heart tightened and she began to worry about Zhang Yuochen. Lu Fanshan's power was beyond Juan Mook Singerling's expectation. Actually, the Fish Dragon realm was above the realm of humans. A person who has reached the first change in the Fish Dragon realm, also called innate embryonic breath, could make heaven and earth spiritual chi as his or her food to reach the foodless realm. Such persons were called monk instead of warrior. As long as the person entered the state of genuine fetal respiration, he or she would not suffocate or starve to death even if they slept at the bottom of the river for 1 year. It was truly beyond the realm of mortals, therefore, countless warriors yearned for it. Lu Fanxian was powerful enough to fight against a monk in the first change in the fish-dragon realm. Facing Lu Fanxian's strong sword, Zhang Yuochen still closed his eyes. He still kept calm and fought against Lu Fanxian with another move of Sacred Guiding Sword. However, this move seemed to be a bit different from his previous moves. Swoosh! Zhang Yuochen still shook his arms, but then, the sword chi from him showed a series of shadows and flew in all directions, forming 6 sword paths. Bang! Bang! The sword chi hit each other and made a series of crackles. Afterward, Zhang Yuochen continued to display his sword movement. In a flash, 36 moves of Sacred Guiding Sword were shown. Each move had a different sword technique. Meanwhile, Lu Fanxian kept fighting against Zhang Yuochen's sword techniques but failed to hit back. How did this happen? How can Zhang Yuochen's low class of spiritual sword technique suppress me? I was wrong. Zhang Yuochen is using swordplay comprehension. His seemingly simple sword technique contains the true essence of sword techniques. Only by breaking Zhang Yuochen's state of swordplay comprehension could Lu Fanxian cause Zhang Yuochen to stumble. Only in this way could Lu Fanxian get an advantage. After thinking about this, Lu Fanxian stopped fighting Zhang Yuochen and retreated to the edge of the Colosseum. Then, with both hands, he lifted the combat sword over his head. He mobilized the chi of Sacred Tree in his body to form a sacred wood sphere. On the Colosseum, the heaven and earth spiritual chi began to condense into green vines and leaves that were tougher than real vines and sharper than real leaves. Vines and leaves grew crazily, covering the whole Colosseum. Only the body of Sacred Tree could practice the sacred wood sphere. In this domain, everything was controlled by Lu Fanxian. Even a simple leaf could immediately become a sharp weapon. Sensing the impending danger, Zhang Yuochen woke up from the state of swordplay comprehension. Without hesitation, he instinctively wielded the sword, cut the vines and leaves, and struck Lu Fanxian. Zhang Yuochen, you've finally entered the state of battle, Lu Fanxian said. Seeing Zhang Yuochen launch an attack, Lu Fanxian was not afraid but happy. He manipulated a root vine to smash towards Zhang Yuochen. Every vine was a sword. Dozens of vines collided with Zhang Yuochen's celestial body. She yelled, making a loud shock sound of genuine chi, cracking Zhang Yuochen's sword movement and forcing him to take 2 steps backward.